So picture this, the mechanism that everyone blames for keeping XRP on a leash actually could be the exact thing starving the market into a frenzy. Now it sounds backwards, doesn't it? But let's just pull at that thread. Okay, so quick disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a financial professional. Your investments are entirely your responsibility and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, or YouTube are liable for any losses. This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. So Monday morning, barely caffeinated, scrolling through the usual kind of doom scroll of crypto Twitter, I see yet another XRP is centralized rant. You know the one, right? Ripple's escrow is a ticking time bomb, monthly token dumps, price suppression, cue the dramatic thunderclap. And I'm thinking, all right, let's actually run the numbers instead of cycling slogans. So I top up my coffee, open up a fresh spreadsheet and dive in. First, context. Now XRP's total supply is forever capped at 100 billion. Of that, roughly 56 billion are already in circulation, zipping around exchanges, hodl wallets, and probably that one USB stick that you forgot about. Now the other chunk, that sits in Ripple's escrow vault, originally 55 billion back in 2017, now trimmed to around 36.5 billion tokens. So picture a slow drip IV feeding the market 1 billion tokens each month, except most of the fluid actually gets rebagged and stored again. So here is where people panic. 1 billion dumped every 30 days? That's like unloading a truckload of oranges onto the farmer's market. Prices will crash. But hold up, Ripple rarely actually sells the full billion. On average, they actually use maybe 200 to 300 million to grease the wheels, support liquidity providers, pilot programs, fund ecosystem grants, and shove the remaining 700 to 800 million back in the escrow with a new lockup date, typically 55 months out. So the translation? They're not flooding the market. They're delaying supply like a chef rotating secret sauce during a long dinner rush. So to wrap my head around this, I think of my college days working at a pizza joint. Now we would kind of par bake crusts early, stash extras in the walk-in, and pull them out when orders spiked. So if we kind of tossed every crust into the counter all at once, well, they would dry out before anyone actually ate them. Now, Ripple's doing exactly the same, keeping the dough fresh, limiting the kind of hits with the oven so that each slice actually holds its value. So if demand kind of suddenly triples, say a Friday night crypto binge, well, the supply isn't there to actually drown it. Prices go up. Right? Tips roll in. Now, critics, they love the word centralized, and yeah, 46% of the supply sitting with Ripple looks pretty chunky, right? But escrow slices that authority into predictable, auditable servings, so that every unlock is algorithmic, it's on-chain and announced months in advance. It's kind of like having a transparent candy machine in the lobby, right? Everyone sees exactly what the next drawbreaker drop is. There's no shadowy backroom deals, there's no surprise flash sales. If anything, Bitcoin whales are actually a lot more mysterious. We don't get a calendar invite when they decide to move coins. Now, let's talk about the psychology here, right? Picture being a market maker in Singapore. Now, you know that at most 300 million XRP could appear at kind of fresh liquidity this month. But you also know that Ripple's ODL corridors are scooping a growing slice for real-world payments, Philippines, Mexico, Brazil. So net float actually available, to flip on exchanges is actually, tightening, not expanding. And that's kind of where the phrase starving the market hits home, right? Ripple's feeding just enough to maintain metabolic kind of function while the ecosystem bulks up in the gym. And speaking of bulking, on-demand liquidity volumes reportedly crossed $30 billion in cumulative transactions just last year. That's not pocket change, that's corporate treasury desks money testing the rails. If ODL, usage actually keeps doubling every 12 months, and it has, for the last 3 years straight, well, the hunger for XRP as a bridge asset could actually outpace those monthly rotations. So just imagine a buffet line where the chef kind of brings out one tray of sushi every hour while 10 new, portions, shuffle every 5 minutes. That's by kind of dessert, people are actually elbowing each other for the crumbs. So a buddy of mine, let's call him Dan, learned this lesson painfully, right? Dan's a diehard Bitcoin maxi. He invited me over last month to show off his new cold storage setup, all proud of the kind of immaculate conception narrative, right? Now, I mentioned the escrow topic and got the kind of predictable eye roll. Dude, Ripple's basically holding a prudential kind of dump button. So I challenged him. I said, pull up the ledger and show me Ripple selling more than 0.25% of daily volume in a single shot. And he couldn't. Instead, he found chart after chart where Ripple's monthly net sales percentage was lower than the average miner sell pressure from BTC's halving cycles. Dan nearly choked on his craft IPA, and it's a true story, sort of. So let's go ahead and sprinkle in a stat then, right? Last quarter, Ripple sold roughly $400 million worth of XRP, all tied to facilitating ODL corridors. Contrast that with Bitcoin miners who offloaded close to $1.1 billion worth of Bitcoin in the same time frame to cover operational costs, which sounds more dumpy. Yet nobody tweets miner dump coin, right? Perspective here does actually matter. And then there's the ETF whisper, right? Rumors swirl that if the SEC ever greenlights an XRP spot ETF, Wall Street desks will need an inventory buffer. Let's call it controversially kind of 500 million to a billion tokens spread across custodians. So where do they source it? Secondary markets? Well, that's gasoline on a supply-squeezed bonfire. Even Ripple's CTO David Schwartz has hinted that burning escrow wouldn't be necessarily because demand growth alone, can actually ellipse the kind of tail end unlocks. Now, some folks, they will actually argue that Ripple should simply just torch the entire escrow. Poof, instant scarcity, Moon inbound. They point to Stellar burning half of its XLM supply in 2019. Spoiler, XLM pumped briefly, then settled back down to earth faster than a skydiver without a chute. Now, market psychology loves burns in theory, but shrugs in practice unless backed by sustained utility. And that's why Schwartz kind of calls it destroying perfectly good value. You don't melt gold bars just to make necklaces more expensive. You craft better jewelry. And the beauty of Ripple's approach is the runaway, right? At the current kind of cycle rate, escrow could last another 7 or 8 years. That's 7 or 8 years of predictable, transparent distribution while network demand idly stacks like Lego bricks. So picture a dam releasing water through fixed, slushes as downstream farms expand. Right? They'll kind of need every drop, maybe more, by harvest time. Scarcity only hits hard when the last kind of, slice kind of gates actually opens and demand keeps kind of rising. I remember when Apple stopped introducing chargers in their iPhone boxes. People screamed, cash grab, but guess what? Accessory sales spiked and landfill waste dropped. Manufacturing scarcity plus ecosystem upgrades equals higher perceived value. So Ripple's doing its own iPhone charger moment then, tightening flows, nudging partners to value every single token. Now, here is where I kind of geek out, right? Scarcity models like the stock to flow have historically been applied to Bitcoin, but XRP's escrow effectively creates a, deterministic S to F curve too. One that kind of that's kind of declining faster each year as stored supply runs dry. So if ODL, micropayments, and potential ETF inflows drive daily demand to, let's say, 2 billion tokens by 2030, while monthly kind of fresh supply is capped at around 300 kind of million, well, that's a 6.7x daily burn through for what's newly released. Scarcity pressure doesn't just push prices, it yanks them with a tow truck. And before I forget, if you want to trade XRP or any other cryptocurrencies on an up-and-coming platform that's actually willing to listen to its users, you should probably check out the crypto Blowfin exchange, right? The link is in the description down below, and it is an affiliate link that directly supports the channel at no extra cost to you. So think of it as tossing a coin in the tip jar while grabbing a solid trading interface. Okay, so back to my coffee-fueled spreadsheet odyssey, right? After crunching the daily volumes, escrow decay rates, and projected ODL growth, I plotted a simple supply and demand curve. So let's just kind of say that a crossover point, where, daily organic demand overtakes available unlocked supply arrives much sooner than what most Twitter debates actually suggest. Now, I'm talking kind of mid-2027 if current trends do hold. Now, that doesn't guarantee fireworks, but it does set the stage for them. So just remember the 2020 Bitcoin halving, right? Prices kind of drifted sideways for months before kind of leaping through the ceiling once miners couldn't meet spot demand. And it's the same kind of energy. Now, of course, risks exist. Regulatory clarity is murky. If the SEC drags its heel on clarifying XRP as a non-security, some institutions stay sidelined. Plus, retail sentiment kind of whiplashes faster than a toddler on a sugar rush. But supply math doesn't care about sentiment. It just keeps on ticking by. And I just keep coming back to that phrase, starving the market. It's a brutal kind of imagery, right? But it's very apt, right? Ripple's escrow is a strict intermittent fasting regime, right? Training the market's metabolism to run lean. By the time that the pantry is actually empty, the appetite might actually be kind of ravenous. And as any kind of grocery shopper knows, walking into a store hungry means that you're going to pay a premium for snacks that you just normally would skip. Oh, and speaking of community appetites, if you haven't already, hop into our free educational Discord server via the link that's in the description. Right, we break down topics like this in real-time charts, on-chain data, memes, the works. It's kind of like having a 24/7 study group where no question is too basic or too kind of galaxy brain. Okay, so let's ground this with a personal parallel then, right? Years ago, I tried a month-long digital detox. No streaming, no social media. Week one was kind of agony, right? My brain was looking for a dopamine vending machine, right? By week 3, though, any kind of new content kind of felt 10 times more valuable. When I finally logged back onto Netflix, I kind of binged a documentary series in a night. Now that's kind of demand shock, right? Ripple's escrow is forcing the market into its own dopamine fast. When that content scarcity kind of hits, prices, well, binge. And one last angle, transparency, right? Every escrow release is visible on chain. You can literally track the transaction hashes for each billion-dollar token unlock, right? Each of those, and how much, you get returned, and verify Ripple's monthly, report against the blockchain reality. So in a world where centralized exchanges sometimes misplace billions overnight, that kind of auditability is actually refreshing. It's the difference between a bakery with an open kitchen and one that's hiding behind swinging doors. You trust the croissants more when you can see the butter going in. And so where does that leave us then? Right, if you're bearish, you argue that Ripple still controls way too much supply and could, in theory, vote themselves into a new distribution schedule. But doing so would nuke trust and tank their enterprise relationships. So game theory says that they won't. Boars, they see a ticking scarcity bomb whose timer kind of shortens every 30 days. Skeptics point to kind of a lackluster price action so far. Supporters point to a multi-season build-out. Now, central bank pilots, real-time gross settlement partnerships, and the subtle but steady kind of march of regulatory wins. Personally, I'm a pragmatic, right? I hold a bag of XRP, but I also hedge. My takeaway is quite simple, right? Escrow isn't a dead weight, it's a disciplined diet plan. And disciplined diets often lead to Beachbody numbers once kind of summer rolls around. And so if you've skipped to the end, shame on you, but here's the recap. Remember, Ripple doesn't just dump 1 billion tokens each month. They recycle about 3/4 back into the escrow. That throttles supply, potentially priming the market for a future squeeze if demand from ODL, ETFs, or plain old FOMO outruns those rations. Transparency? Check. Predictability? Check. Centralization mitigated by on-chain locks. And if someone starts shouting, just burn it all, remember Stellar's cautionary tale. Supply control without matching kind of demand is just kind of, pyrotechnics. And all right, so deep breath. If this breakdown opened your eyes or at least kind of sparked a new angle to debate in the comments section, smash that like button for me gently, there's no need for violence, and share it with your kind of favorite skeptic cousin, if you will. Next up, I'm going to be digging into all sorts of different things that are going on in the background when it comes to XRP. So hit that subscribe button and I'll see you in the next rabbit hole.